Hello and welcome to the Smart Chiropractor Show. In our featured guest segment, my name is Dr. Jeff Langmaid here with my co-host, Dr. Jason Deitch. And today's featured guest, we have somebody that we have been following for quite a while online. He is an athlete, he is a chiropractor, he is a movement specialist, and much more. And author, Dr. Beau Beard. Beau, thanks for taking some time and chatting with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
You got it. So my first question is around content. You are an avid content creator. We were talking before we came on. You said you started a YouTube channel from day one. How did you get into content creation, number one? And number two, how has it affected your practice as you guys have built a fantastic practice in Birmingham, Alabama?
Thank you, first of all, for that. So how I got into it was actually, we just didn't want to send people home with a piece of paper with exercises. So it was just an internal system to use YouTube, which you guys are going to laugh at how archaic this was. Is I would then take the link, we had a spreadsheet, and I would like tell my front office staff, like, hey, send them this exercise, and they'd Gmail it to them. So you look at now, like we've built an app and we've used all these things we deliver exercise with, so you're like, oh my gosh. But that got me into the game. I never looked at YouTube as a content creation thing. I was like, we'll just use it internally. Well, then, you get a couple questions from random people about, hey, what about this? What about that? And then I started doing more explanation videos instead of these short, like 30-second exercises. And, a couple of those hit. And it's not just about like, oh, it hit, let me make more, because that can become kind of an itchy scratch the wrong way. It just kind of became something that I like doing. Like it's easy for me to get in front of a camera, do a one take, explain something. I like fielding questions, and then, I'm going to talk about this stuff anyways. So I might as well get in front of a camera so a bunch of people can see it more than once. How it's affected our practice and maybe some of the other things I've done outside of practice is, it's just like social media, not just YouTube. It's opened up doors, right? You meet people, opportunities arise, whether that's, teaching, collaborating with people. And then honestly, during COVID, the ability to tap into that YouTube base for things like virtual consultations was just, it was like a dinner that was waiting in the microwave for me at that point. And I'm glad I had done it. And that's, most of my virtual consults are like not even in this country. So that's just a very good tool for that people can reach you from anywhere. So, yeah.
I would love to, thank you for sharing that, Beau. I'd love to dig deeper in that because part of what we look to bring to our audience is a shift in understanding of how to think about creating content. And I'm going to ask you sort of how you think about it, because we all sort of see what's going on with our profession, and most chiropractors have a tendency to think, okay, if I'm going to take my time and do something like this, there better be a good return on investment. Like, let me try doing a few videos and see what I get in return. And oftentimes they don't get much in return in the short period. And so they kind of set themselves up for failure. How do you think about creating content? Is it to get new patients? Is it to help inspire more people to become more curious? And if you can go even deeper in terms of, you obviously worldwide, you've got an audience of thousands of people. I see you on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. You've got your own videos on your own website. And that seems to be translating into a whole variety of different things. You've got, your concierge membership program. Obviously, you've got regular individual visits. You've got a whole gym. How do you put all that together? And ultimately, I guess what I want the audience to get a sense for is, how do you think, what's your why for creating this content? And what would you recommend they think if they're thinking about following what you're doing? And we'll put the links down below, because you should be looking at what beaubeard.com. We'll put the link. You should look at it. It is what we think of as a Roger Bannister moment, somebody who's doing something that hasn't been done before, that everybody should look at and go, I can do that. In fact, you should do that. And so, kudos to you for doing it. And what do you think docs need to know in order to be able to sort of follow in your footsteps?
Let me hit on a couple points there. Is first, I've had a lot of advice, which, sometimes it's just like any advice, unsolicited or solicited, on what you should be presenting on social media, what drives content. Like you said, you could be checking, insights and statistics and Google ads, and that's never been my thing. In the beginning, I would look at our website all the time because I built it and like, hey, are we outperforming people in SEO searches? But, which YouTube is a huge part of that in the beginning. If you had videos, it's gigantic. Now that's not the case. I've never been driven by that. And I'm a little bit, if you guys can't tell by some of the videos, I like to kind of push back against stuff. Not that my opinion's right, but like there's information out there that we kind of are led by, and then we have our own experiences. And I just sometimes think that like the things that we may all talk about in our clinic, they're like, yeah, this is the way it is, isn't the overarching like, what's well known out there. Those are usually the things I'm going after, right? If it's an explanation video or something like that, it's like, why do we think your IT band, the pain around that is caused by this? Well, maybe that's not the case, which opens up people's minds that then they can walk into their own practitioner's office and kind of be, I hate to say armed with that because we don't want people to go, become defensive, but it's like, that's an important part of what we're doing is educating people, whether that's on YouTube or in my office. So that's the big piece is education versus grabbing things. If I wanted to grab views, I think we all know I could, adjust somebody's neck and, get a loud pop and I'd have hundreds of thousands of more views. That's just not my game, right? And if that's your game, more power to you. I'm not against it, but I want to educate, whether I, get 20 views or 20,000, that kind of is besides the point to me. I'll bring up a kind of side point on that because you said like, you were mentioning like beaubeard.com, which is fairly new. Chirofarm.com is our clinic website. I've had this big struggle, and maybe you guys will share this a little bit of, I'm the one that's on the YouTube videos. I like doing this stuff. And I was like, do I split myself off from the practice at some point so I can do fun things like write a book? That's tough to do, but like what kind of is interesting, if you look at anybody that's really out there like teaching or doing things outside of the clinic, it's a personal brand. And you can do that from a clinic, but like you have to separate at some point. I've just been lucky enough that the farm isn't really looked at as like purely a chiropractic office. It's looked at kind of like a thing. At one point I was like, maybe the farm is an education company, not a chiropractic office. And then I was like, well, within that, it's kind of like that's the circus tent that like all these things can operate underneath, right? Whether that's different professions, different professionals, different ideas. And I'm just a creative person by nature, so I'm always looking for that thing. And that's what I'm now exploring more and more is like, yeah, I've done all the farm stuff. My wife and I contribute to that probably equally on social media, but now it's like, hey, I have these other things I want to do, and I don't necessarily want that to be under the farm. And that's kind of the next step for me is like, can I step out, but still like obviously stay under that circus tent?
That makes a lot of sense. And I'd love to drill down on that a little bit because we were talking pre-roll about different revenue streams and business opportunities. Clearly, with what you've been able to create, you have a sharp mind for business. You were discussing that ancillary revenue streams came up really important over the last few years, and it was only based upon the audience that you created that enabled you to build and grow additional revenue streams and diversify the revenue. Can you explain a little bit about how you've thought of that and the process of where you're at today regarding memberships, recurring revenue, and diversifying outside of strictly, not in replacement of, but outside of a strictly fee-for-service model?
Yeah. And I mean, there's diversification within the clinic as well, right? Which is still fee for service. And that's really based on value, right? What we think is the best, because it is more than just our, conservative musculoskeletal care. I mean, there's more to health, and we're a health management clinic, not just a chiropractic clinic. Outside of fee for service, the way I've looked at it is, again, like it goes back to the education piece. Like I love to educate. You can create a personal brand that then creates a springboard to where maybe people reach out to you. I mean, that could be a variety of things, not just teaching other chiropractors, which I love doing, but like writing an article in a magazine, getting propped up for a podcast. Like all of those things occur if you're creating face value. And it's not just that term, right? The value behind the face, that's the big thing. Like you can be out there online all the time, and you could kind of spin your wheels, which kind of gets back to Jason's initial question of like, well, what drives the content creation? I really think that like in my mind, when I'm buckling down on like, well, how am I going to diversify? It just comes down to authenticity of like, what do I have to offer that's based on me? Sometimes I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if that's going to have a great uptick in revenue. If I talk about trail running more, if I show people that I like to go outside and hang out, like it may not have a direct ROI that I'll ever be able to track. But I can tell you one thing, and you guys know this from being in the clinic, the people that you create raving fans out of just connect with you. You may have a great result with the person that you're just never going to be best buddies with, but usually it's a good connection creates good referrals. Well, you can do that outside of the clinic, right? YouTube, social media, people connect with you because you're who you are, not just the information you're providing. And that's something that I think gets missed a lot. And that's why we see a lot of the same information. Like you just, if you scroll through the search on Instagram for plantar fasciitis, you're going to see a ton of the same stuff. What's how it's delivered? What did you, all those things matter at that point. It's not just bells and whistles and snaps and cracks. It's like, who is that person? And then you connect to somebody different. And, not everybody, I'm not everybody's jam for sure. And that's a big point of this too.
Beau, I'd love, I'm hoping everybody watching is going to sort of audit what you're up to, see what's possible, what they've done. But I'd be curious if you'd be willing to share, now that you are where you are, you're like us, you're never there. So what does the future look like? What do you hope to do now that you've built the level of audience you have? You've got, the consistency in what you're doing. What do you see the future being? And I guess I'll also add, what do you wish that the rest of the profession would do? Knowing what you know, experiencing what you've experienced. If you were teaching thousands of chiropractors about what's possible for them, where are you going and where do you think they should go?
Yeah, great question. Because I'm just always maybe too much thinking what's next, but now I get to talk about it. So from the clinic side, I want to keep making this just the biggest funnel of everything that would make somebody a better person, right? And making sure that that's actual value and not just I get paid more money for the things I have in the clinic. So that's the clinical side. The personal side is, like a specific project, and that's why I'm branching off into this, my personal brand more, is I do like teaching other professionals. So I've created this program called The Residency, which is all online. There'll be maybe some in-person or live events in the future, but it's just kind of bridging that gap from like a residency would, from school to real world application of, techniques, ideologies, methodologies. Because I didn't come up with this quote. Brett Winchester, a mentor of mine, says, or he stole it from somebody, that students are swimming in knowledge, but I'm going to mess up his quote, starving for application, whatever he says. Sorry, Brett. But they have all the information, they just don't know how to apply it. And we all know that, but what are we going to do about it that's different than just saying, well, for this thing, you treat that? It's really I love books and information about learning and then how to apply learning over time, like meta learning. That's what we need more of, is how do you teach people to learn, teach people to think? That's what I'm really interested in. So that's kind of where I'm going personally. And then the question about, what do I wish more of the profession knew, which we're all, anybody that's in this realm, super smart, bright, usually driven. My big thing is, I think we're going to, and I talk about this in the residency, I think we're going to kind of get slapped upside the head here pretty soon of realizing that what we do in the conservative musculoskeletal realm in terms of standard treatments, right? Adjusting, soft tissue manipulation, exercise, even the best in the world will become less and less effective due to people becoming more and more unhealthy, which means that you have to personally have more of a knowledge base on the wide berth of just health. But you also are probably going to need allies if you're not going to be a functional medicine practitioner yourself. And it's not just funk med, it's all those things that pertain to health, right? The psychological component, the fitness side of it. That's what I think we're going to get hit with, that if I'm really good today, and let's say I'm the best in the world at adjusting in soft tissue, I'm just a stud, I think in 10 years, you're going to be less effective. But you would think you'd be more effective because you just get better. But I think you're going to be dealing with a population that just doesn't, it's like the best mechanic in the world and the car's just consistently falling apart and he's just trying to piecemeal it together. It's you have to approach it differently. And we're never going to get, well, maybe we'll get a new car or a new body here pretty soon. I don't know. But if we don't, we better really start figuring out how to take care of people's health from a 360-degree standpoint instead of just being that conservative musculoskeletal practitioner.
How do you translate that into action steps and content creation and building an audience and all the things you've done so far for your recommendation for others?
Yeah, and I'll have a blunt honesty moment here. I've been timid on pulling the trigger on speaking more about the functional medicine side because I've never went through the IFM coursework, through functional medicine training myself. I feel like I can talk about it on a very high level, But just because I can talk about an orthopedic surgery on a high level doesn't mean I'm an orthopedic surgeon. So I've been hesitant because, again, I want to speak from a place of knowledge, experience, and not that like certifications have to be in place, because you and all of us in this room know that like there are people out there that are helping people with their health with no certifications, and that's fine. And it's a different world. It's a wild west of virtual telehealth, concierge, whatever you want to call it, medicine. I'm cool with that, but like that's my first thing, is realizing like, okay, if I'm going to approach this topic again, if it's online or within my clinic, what basis am I standing on? Is it just anecdotal experience and my own personal journey, or do I want to go through some extensive training to make sure that like I'm just kind of there? That's part of it. The second part is, and this may not be the answer you're looking for, the residency. I'm always saying that like we talk about a principles-led approach to care. And some people would think that's, well, what are your principles? Like, ethically sound, good communication, technically sound. No. I think in the first year or 2 years of school, chiropractic school, PT school, whatever, medical school, you learn basic sciences. Everything you do from that point on is based on basically the 4 core sciences, which is not much, but I think we kind of forget that. And then this is where we can get sold a bill of sales later by what other practitioners, teachers, educators tell us, and we start doing things. And if we ran it back through the filter of first principles of physiology, biology, physics, anatomy, we'd be like, well, that doesn't really hold water. That's really what I'm trying to do, is like, you can learn a lot about health, but if you always go back, you just kind of understand like, okay, I understand. Remember, basic, nutrition is based on what? Chemistry. Like, you know what I mean? So it kind of goes back. Did you forget all that stuff? Because if you want to go back and learn about high-level functional medicine, nutrition, that's all it is. So like keep that, like keep fresh on that, keep basically interested and inquisitive about like kind of being a scientist, not just a practitioner. I know not everybody wants to do that, but I think if you're going to be the best in the world or strive to be the best in the world, that's kind of, you got to put on that scientist hat every once in a while and be like, I got to go back to these first principles and make sure that like I'm staying clean so I can't get like deterred or like thrown off track. I hope I answered your question. I think I got thrown off track there.
That was fantastic. A core thread throughout that to me is movement. Clearly you've been movement based as a practice, as a provider, and you recently came out with a book called The Age of Movement. I'd love for you to tell us, what have you seen in practice over these past few years? You mentioned people getting unhealthier as time goes on. And I always view movement through 3 core lenses: segmental, regional, and whole body. And that's how we apply a lot of our teach and invite consistently philosophy throughout the content we produce for Smart Chiropractor members. How are you thinking of movement? Maybe talk a little bit about the book as well, because I've found that as one of the most interesting and exciting areas in the growth of chiropractic the last 15 to 20 years. And there's a lot to be said on the intersection, as we're talking with Steve Capobianco, of mental and physical and how all of that's combined. What are your thoughts on that? What have you seen? And maybe tell a little bit about the book that you recently wrote as well.
Yeah. First of all, the book was honestly set up as an answer to a lot of the questions I got in the clinic, right? So the middle section of the book is the human movement guide, and it's literally taking you from in utero to death of kind of what's normal with a little bit of guidance. I didn't want to paint this as like a how-to. It's more what's expected of a human at all these stages of life. Because as I've said it before, and this is kind of a funny story from the clinic, I had a patient that bought a brand new Porsche, and she came into me like 3rd visit, and she was kind of complaining like, hey, I've had to go back to the dealership like 3 times because I don't understand how to work this like car. But she wouldn't do any exercise I gave her. And I just kind of pointed out to her, I was like, do you realize the irony in that? Like, you'll learn everything about this machine, yet nothing about this machine. So that's like my jumping off point when I first started thinking like, why don't we in school get some sort of like manual or learner's, manual for like your body, which we have health class and science, but we never really get to figure out how to take care of our health. So that's why I wrote the movement piece. It's like, I feel like I'm pretty well-versed in the movement piece. I can write a book and how that pertains to other parts of health without diving into all the realms of health. So that was the big push for the book. My lens of movement, which I kind of tie in the beginning and the end of the book, is that, and this isn't wholly my idea. People like Dan Lieberman talk about these mismatched diseases. where we're becoming less and less human, right? Like I'm becoming better at sitting in this chair, and that's an adaptation, right? Adaptation doesn't mean better or worse. It's just you're adapting. Well, that can have good or bad ramifications on my health as a human. So then it's like, how do I like get people to realize that like it's not just about exercising an hour a day, right? That movement is like you were saying, like Capo mentioned, like it's inherently tied into like how our genetics present themselves, how healthy we are in many realms of health, not just my joints and my muscles and my tissue, my mental health, how long I may live, the years, how long I'm going to live healthily. Like all these things play into movement, and it may seem like too broad a generalization in the book to say like, and I even say that, like to think that movement is going to be this like panacea of health fix. I know that's not true, but it is such a big part, and it is largely the part that we just kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, I'll take this medication, I'll change my diet, I'll, do a red light therapy, jump in the sauna and all this stuff. And it's like, if you literally look at the research, if you just did some zone 2 exercise, like one time a week, moved generally 4 days a week, lifted something heavy once a week, like you would be so much better for it. It's not even funny. And that makes it seem way simple, which it should be if we want a lot of people to bite that hook. But like, it's just something that's missed. And like you said, now we see that all of our practices are have moved towards this, like incorporating movement, strength training principles, things like that. Well, why? Because we know it's needed, right? It's a different population. It's not the 1970s when people were labor workers doing more throughout the day, and they did have aches and pains that we could knock out, and then they go back to this fairly active life. People are not fairly active anymore. They're sedentary, overweight, and unhealthy. We need more movement, and that's why we're all gravitating towards it, in my opinion.
Needing more movement. I think that is a great place to sort of wrap up our conversation for today. I know we could go on for hours because there are many unasked questions that I'd love to get to, so we'll probably invite you back for a part 2. But for those docs out there that are just learning of the residency, just learning of the books, and as Jason said, would like to see how content creation is being done at a high level, where can they check you out and follow what you're up to?
Yeah, so like I said, the 2 websites, our clinic website is chirofarm.com, and then my personal website is beaubeard.com. And then on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, it's Dr. Beau Beard. And you can always reach out to me with questions, comments, whatever.
Awesome. Thank you, Beau, so much for coming on and sharing with us. We really appreciate it, and you have been a fantastic guest to chat with. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for watching this video on the Smart Chiropractor. To not miss a single thing that's clinically oriented, marketing oriented, or more, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel today.